plant a seed with you, lie down and sleep with you, wipe the tears and weep with you, the thought of you completes me. When time is short, but the wait is long, the pages unfold after all. Yeah, I love the way you make me feel, the way my heart does things to you. I love the way you say my name, the whispers in the we are one.
Welcome, everybody. We got this young man coming out of Vancouver, BC, sitting opposed from me across the table. He is an Indigenous young man and an Indigenous artist. Belongs to the Frog Clan and is from the Carrier and the Cree Nations. One of the dopest natives alive, for sure. One of the best musicians in Vancouver, where you can find them playing, busking at the beach, holding a crowd of hundreds, entertaining the millions and the masses with his one of his buddies that pays the cajon.
Yeah.
I want to introduce you to Zach Saunders. Welcome to Dopest Natives Alive. This is our home studio. This is our podcast, and this is where we sit down and chop it up with talented musicians within our community. So here we are, and we just came into this episode. We were led in with one of your songs, your own songs. Do you want to tell us about that song quickly? And
Sure, yeah. The name of that song was called The Thought of You. I wrote that, got a bunch of verb on there.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I wrote that song actually when I first moved to Vancouver, moved back to Vancouver about 10 years ago, I think. And, it was just all written from a feeling. Just what it feel like to have someone that really cared about, you know. I was also, really young. I was, 19. And I hadn't been in serious love yet, so that's kind of how that song came to be. But, you can find it on SoundCloud, actually. Just SoundCloud, Zach Saunders, or the Zach Saunders. Zach with the H, Saunders with the U. It's kind of my thing. But, yeah.
So you're 19 and you wrote this song, Thought of You,
Mm-hmm.
and you said that you haven't really had been in a relationship at that point in your life?
No, I was yearning for it. I don't know if you... It was just I romanticized that, which is why I wrote that song, yeah.
I see. So it was, you weren't singing about your right hand, were you?
No, it was my left hand wrote a song about how he misses the right hand.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a pretty good song. So
thanks.
Whatever you guys do, don't play that song.
The song's about masturbation.
That's hilarious. But it's dope that you have your own songs to be able to perform, and it made me. Yeah, you were saying that you weren't yet involved in a relationship there,
Mm-hmm.
so you're drawing. What I was wondering was you're drawing some emotions and some feelings from some place to be able to craft those lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought what I was going to ask you was, who was that person?
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess when I was in high school, I had crushes and stuff like anybody, but who was it about? I don't know. It was kind of that song was kind of about the idealized feeling, and then it's funny because after that I met somebody, and then it was kind of like the song. It was pretty cool. Like the very first couple of years, it was just this is kind of like my song.
So you kind of sang it into fruition almost, like you forecasted that with that song.
I guess, yeah. And
that could be the beauty and the magic of music, that, if you keep it, maybe write a song about if I had a million. For those those guys, you know.
Boats and hoes, boats. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you never know. Hey man, you're putting it out to the universe, and the universe might respond that way, and that's probably could be possibly how that first person in your life came to you. It might be, right?
Yeah, and
You're whipping up some magic potion.
I guess it's like ethereal. It was funny because like before we started just now, like I was thinking about like how I hadn't gone to music school at that point when I wrote that song, and I was just now I'm kind of trying to refine my creative element because before I was very like I was really good at math and science, so everything was like very like A plus B equals C, and I did really well doing that, and I approached guitar that way, and I approached music and everything I did. I approached the friendships I made. I approached everything very like exact, and one of my good friends, Patrick, he was just kind of like, yeah, you're one of the most like logical people I've ever met. And then now it's like, and he always had this thing for art and writing, and he writes these amazing songs, but I was just like, where does that come from? And he could never explain it to me. So it took me going through my books and asking questions, and now ChatGPT. But and then to just realize, no, like creativity is this other thing, and it all comes from a feeling. I'm realizing, and you can't. It's almost spiritual in a way, because how can you describe a spiritual experience? It's hard to put that in words. So I was realizing art is like that, and then like how before I had gone to school, I saw music that way.
Yeah. So I want to make a few connections there. For one, you said exact.
Mm-hmm. That's my favorite word, because whenever.
Exact.
Yeah, I always
Things
look.
gotta be exact. Okay,
Lols.
that's the way they gotta be. And you talked about your proficiency in math and academics, which reminds me that you received a letter from somebody pretty important in the world. Who was that?
Oh, I told you about that? Oh wow. Yeah, when I was in high school, I got the presidential award from President Obama, but it wasn't from him personally. It was from his team, but still, I got a president's award.
Nice.
Cool.
That's pretty dope. And then when you talk about how you approach music with the same type of proficiency and the same type of attack, I guess, it landed you with an opportunity to go to Berklee School of Music.
Oh yeah.
And so there was a competition for one seat. Do you want to?
Oh yeah. So no, I auditioned for Berklee and I got accepted. The thing is that Berklee is an amazing school, and as soon as you go through there, you can feel the creative energy. It's pretty cool. But because of that, it's also one of the most expensive schools for music. It was like $70,000. So really, you're competing for the scholarship. Unfortunately, because of John Mayer, a lot of people that go there are like guitar players and singer-songwriters. So like the people who get scholarships are people who like play trumpet or play trombone or something like that. But so I didn't get a scholarship, but I got accepted, which was pretty cool. And I got to spend 3 days there, which in that 3 days was really eye-opening, because I'd never been in an environment where people were just expressing themselves only with music, which was pretty cool. Like it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm in the dorms. I'm going to a recording session with these guys, and then when you walk in, there's a guy like playing his guitar, writing a song, banging his foot on a guitar case, which was pretty cool. And then I look over to my left. There's a group of like soul singers. They're just working on their parts. This is 3 a.m. on like a Saturday, where the people are usually out like getting hammered or something, or partying. But it was just pretty cool. Like I don't know, it was just like wow. And then I look to my right. There's all these metalheads just like writing metal songs. I'm like, I'm going to a recording session. I'm like, I found heaven. It's at Berklee. It was pretty cool. I liked it. But unfortunately, I didn't get to go. I went to another great school called Musicians Institute, which was really similar in that way. It was very creative, but it was very technical. Like it was very like a technical institute. It was more like these are the rules. It was a different experience, but it was still good. I still appreciate my time there.
And were both schools in the same city, same area, or?
I know Berklee. So yeah, Berklee gets confused a lot with UC Berkeley. The Berklee I'm talking about is spelled with 2 E's at the end. Berklee College of Music, and it's in Boston, in the States. And then the music school I ended up going to is called Musicians Institute. It's in Hollywood, California, which is pretty cool. Which was great. That part was really cool, being around everything, like being a block or one train station away from like the Oscars, like and just stuff like that was really neat.
So when you think, when we mentioned Berklee, what are some of the names of artists that came through that program that you know of that are successful? Like,
Oh, like a lot of people. Off the top of my head, John Mayer went there. I think I mentioned that before. Steve Vai, he's more of a guitar player, but he's an amazing guitar player. He went there. From what I know of, some guys from a couple of the people from Imagine Dragons went there.
Oh yeah.
And you know I'm all about that bass. That girl, she went there. Charlie Puth went there. So like some pretty heavy hitters.
So do you think if you actually went through that program, your career might have been different, or do you think it's?
Well, I think what would have happened is if I went there now, it was more. Because it's funny you say that because there's someone that actually works at the music store here in Vancouver along McQuaid, and he went to Berkeley, and he's an awesome guy, but it really put into perspective all your goals and the kind of musician you want to be. So it's just kind of like, I think there's a lot of people who go to Berkeley mainly because they know who they are, their chops are up, but they're just trying to get in with the right people and that right network. And but yeah, Berkeley has a great program. Like you do become a better musician, but it kind of goes. There's like this weird thing they say there, that like if you graduated from Berkeley, you weren't good enough. I didn't invent it. I'm just telling what people say.
Yeah.
So a lot of people drop out, because they meet their people and they go pursue their career.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It kind of ties into what I heard one of these entrepreneurs talking about, that it's a lot of the C-grade average students that own all these multi-million, billion-dollar companies, and they have all these A-grade masters, PhD students working for them.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like. But anyways, to speak about the LA school, there was also another musician, or one of your instructors was a writer or a performer. I never saw him, a lot of people know him.
Yeah, his name is Stuart Ziff. I wonder if he's still playing with them, but he plays...
Shout out Stuart.
What's up, Stuart?
He's going to be watching us, guaranteed.
Yeah.
With the 3 other people. No.
Lols. Yeah, maybe, but one day. But yeah, he was my private guitar teacher. His name was Stuart Ziff. He played guitar at the time. He played with War, the band that did the song. Hello, right? So he played with them, and yeah, he also wrote a song called "Thinking Problem." It's by the artist that performs it. It's David Ball. It was interesting when I came up here. I told Uncle Les or Les, my uncle, and I was like, "Do you know the song "Thinking Problem" by David Ball?" He was like, "Yeah, I know that song." And I was just like, "Oh yeah, my teacher wrote that." He was like, "What? I partied to that song. It's a great song." And I was like, "Yes." So it was, yeah, being in Hollywood was crazy because you just meet people who were doing like amazing things, So it was and it was a very normal thing. It was like when you're around people that are doing it, it's just a job. It was really eye opening for that.
Cool. So with you mentioning your uncle brings to mind to me to share with the people where you were born,
Mm-hmm.
and where you were raised at,
Mm-hmm.
and then where you're kind of at now, a little bit of your journey.
Oh sure, yeah. So I'm half First Nations by my mom. Yeah, Cree and Psychis First Nations, and then Psychis is northern BC, and Cree is in Alberta, drift pop, and then I'm half black. If you can tell.
Yeah.
I had this weird joke. I was like, I'm half First Nations and half blackface. That's my nation. But I remember I was like at a gig up north at Prince George, and I forgot the line, and I just awkwardly was like, "What is the line? What is?" It just didn't land. It was really awkward, which kind of made it funny thinking about it now, but it was terrible. But anyway, yeah, I'm half black, and on my black side, my dad's from South Carolina, and I ended up spending the first 10 years of my life in Vancouver in Canada, and then I moved down to Hampton, Virginia, Hampton Roads, and that's kind of where music really started for me when I was down there.
Yeah, and you were involved in bands. You said band class, marching band, was it, or?
Oh yeah, I was in all that, like
drumline and stuff like that.
That was my brother. I used to be able to mess around with jam with those guys. I used to be able to just pick up stuff by looking at things. Like I had this awesome band director. His name was Mr. Jennifer. Like he was just like my hero at the time. I was like 12 years old, and I'm like, this guy's awesome. Like he played clarinet and played all jazzy, and then he was just such a cool guy. He was like, "Hey, what's up, Zay?" Like I just loved him. And he's just, I remember I grew up and he's like, you're still doing music, right on, man. Like, and I was the biggest band geek. But, yeah, I just used to just do music. I immediately got hooked. It used to tickle something in my brain. Like, and it was just like, I never felt anything as real as music. No one had to make me do it. You know, I just did it. You know, I loved it. And I did, I started out playing, like everyone, recorder, but like, when I was in Canada, of course, like I learned like the hot cross buns, but then I was bored and I had like a recorder from the dollar store and I played the crap out of that recorder. Like I taught myself how to read music. I was playing a lot of folk songs. It was a dollar store recorder, so I ended up breaking it because I played it so much. And I learned all the notes and stuff, taught myself how to read. And then went to school band, and I was always like, I want to take music class. And I took one music theory class, and then I was hooked. And by the next year, I was in beginner band, and I was playing French horn because my dad was a trumpeter, and he talked a lot about French horn. I started playing French horn, and then I just got really good really quickly. So I started playing with the advanced people. And I just kept doing the music thing, trying to be the best at it that I could be at it. And it was cool going from beginner band, reading, which that's an experience in and of itself, being in a room with like 60 people that are all playing music with you at the same time. It's the coolest feeling. You're like, whoa, like you just feel really big. And then, but then I was in the intermediate band, and then I got a solo. All my first year of playing music, and then I got the trumpet solo. And then I became friends with all those people in that more advanced band. By 8th grade, or was it 7th grade? I think it was 7th grade that I got. In Canada we say grade 7, but in the States they say 7th grade. And they made sure to like get 7th grade, not grade 7. I was like, okay, fine, it's 7th grade. But yeah, in 7th grade, I got like a trophy. I should have brought it with me. It was like basically I said biggest band geek in Sims Middle School.
Yeah.
And in high school, I was in marching band. I picked up the guitar when I was 14. My dad had an old classical guitar. He actually bought the wrong strings because he didn't know anything about guitar. So I'm playing a classical guitar. So anybody out there who knows a guitar, I was playing a classical guitar with acoustic strings. Like I was ripping the skin off my fingers and my fingers were bleeding. I had no idea though. I just loved playing. And I wanted to play flamenco at the time. I was weird. I had long nails. I was such a nerd. And then I met this guy named TJ Stokes. Shout out to TJ from I joined his band, Tropical Jam. I ended up playing guitar in a Hawaiian band, which was pretty cool. We started to get recognized around the city in Hampton. And, and then I just was like, immediately, when I was 11 years old, I was just like, I found my thing. This is what I'm going to do. It was like, awesome. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And I was like, oh, crap. This is really tough. And I've just been figuring it out, you know?
So for me, when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, like, you're putting down foundational building blocks of what's making you who you are today and where you're going in the future. And so you're talking about your heritage being First Nations and the historical oppression and struggle we have persevered through and endured for 500 plus years. Then you got your black side that have endured a similar atrocity in this land, brought to a foreign land, and still to this day face oppression. You know, there's really great foundation. I don't know if you watched that documentary, Rock something, but it talked about the influence Indigenous culture had on black music, like blues and all this and that.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And so when you talk about those foundational, those are your building blocks of where the spirit and the soul may come from in terms of what you're doing musically. But also you compile on other pieces, like your opportunity to have been at Berkeley, going to the LA Institute Music School, being from Hampton, Virginia, where multiple dope artists come from.
Hey, I did not realize how many musicians, like, well-known came from
Hip hop.
Yeah.
We got Timbaland, we got Missy.
We got Pharrell.
We got Neptunes, right?
Yep. Who else? Dave Matthews Band, Jason Mraz, you know, in that world. Victor Wooten, which is a musician's musician, but he's from, like, I met people who saw him play when he was at, anybody who's from Virginia knows this, Busch Gardens. He was a kid, 7-year-old, playing at this crazy, like, amusement park. And anyway, there's lots of musicians from there.
Yeah, so when I look at that, of the fabric that has been stitched together for your foundation of where you're going in your life, it seems to me like you have a lot of key elements of making a great musician. When and where you find that launch pad for yourself, you take me to Toronto. You were there pursuing your music there, and how was that experience for you?
Oh yeah, Toronto's cool. I loved it because it reminded me all the great things I love about Canada and all the great things I love about the States were there. Like, what I love about Canada is how inclusive we are and how we are a country of you can be yourself as long as you're not mean to anybody else.
Yeah.
And so you could be any way you want to be, which was great, which I really loved. And people are very inclusive and they're very appreciative of different cultures and different food. The food in Toronto was amazing. And one thing that I really liked about Toronto too was the musicianship was awesome. Like, you can just go to an open mic there and like you're going to see people who can play. And actually, there was an open mic that's pretty well known amongst musicians in Toronto called the Supermarket. It's in called Kensington Market. Kensington Market in Toronto is kind of like Commercial Drive, similar vibe.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. And it's cool because while I was in there, I actually ended up meeting the bass player from this band called Magic. Well, those guys used to go there before they moved to LA and got really successful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice. There's lots of amazing musicians in Toronto. It was just like, what I found. And there's a lot of young people that like soul.
Oh yeah.
Like, they're all like old soul. Like,
that's good.
Yeah, this 20-year-old kid wanted me to play. He was like not feeling well. He's in the shower, and like he was just running cold water and stuff. It was late, and he was just like, "Can you play the song? Everybody loves the sunshine." And I'm just like, "What? You're 20. Like, what do you know about this song?" Everybody wants the sunshine. And I'm just like, "Oh my god, it's hilarious." But
yeah, it's pretty cool though. Yeah, exactly. Because you know what, I think a lot of I'm not gonna say we're at risk of losing blues and soul and a lot of the great music we've had in the past, but it's good to know that the younger generation is finding it and listening and consuming it and hopefully emulating it, so on and so forth. But I've also heard you talk about up here, us as Canadians, we say this and that, which brings to question, do you identify as Canadian, American, or Indigenous? And
it's a great question because that's something that I struggled with for a long time, because I lived in Vancouver specifically, where Vancouver feels very strongly about racism. So my experience of racism in Vancouver is that basically it's a bad idea when I grew up. But then, people just treated me like a person. And it's funny because I was just around a bunch of people who, doesn't matter the race, it was like it wasn't that important, or it wasn't worth talking about. But then I went from that culture to Hampton, Virginia, which was very different. So it didn't matter who you were talking to, the race of a person kind of mattered, and I'm mixed race, and especially in this, there's a couple things. I'm from Canada, so technically in Canada I sound Canadian, but in America I sound white. White people over the phone, I'm on like Craigslist, so you're a white guy? I'm like, no, I'm Canadian. But it took me a while to figure that out because there was a bit of bullying as far as like when I had troubles getting along with certain people of the black community in America, because I'm just completely culturally different, even though we have the same heritage, same skin. And it was interesting because they used to, like, the bullying was like, you're white, you're white, you're white. And I'm just like, well, I do like skateboarding, I do like rock music, but like I also liked hip hop growing up, and I liked rap and all this stuff. But the more I experienced that kind of like, you're not like us, the more I was like, fine, I'm not like you guys then, But now what I realized was that I'm actually a mixed person. So I'm First Nations and black, and the people who can really understand that are people who are mixed, that come from two strong cultural identities, which for me, like being black and being First Nations are very strong cultural identities. There's like, we have our things that we're, and so I feel blessed in that way because of that, I have friends of all different races, and I feel blessed in the way too because like I'm trying to get more creative with my music and try to use, like, I'm going through a philosophical thing of, like, you brought up like a lot of the trauma that both sides have gone through, with me and my siblings, we've experienced trauma from both sides, which is really interesting. From being a Canadian First Nations child and also being a Black American child as well, the trauma from both sides. So I'm trying to figure out how to take, like, my philosophy in art is that, like, you take something that isn't beautiful and you make it beautiful. So I'm trying to figure out, or trying to do that through my art. You know what I mean? So, and so far so good that it's helped me become a good musician. You know, it's maybe this feels so good. This is so real. Like, you know, it makes all that stuff. You know, and then learning how to actually put myself out in that way using art for that. So yeah.
And it's interesting that we seem to face racism and or prejudice or whatever from people who look just like us, right?
It's really,
which is it's troubling. It's crabs in the bucket. Like you say, you're too black to be native, and you're too native to be black, or you're too Canadian to be black. Those types of things. Connecting back to Prince George, you had talked about your heritage with one of the people who were at your show, and you told him that you were
Cree.
And his response was,
he was like, he puffed his chest out at me and he's like, I'm a Ojibwe. And I'm like, alright, dude. But obviously there's history there that wasn't caught up on. Like, I did not know that the Cree, we have a lot of skeletons in the closet, apparently.
yeah, well, we're coast to coast like butter on toast, so you know, just the way it is. But you know, on the same token, just looking at that, I know that I've experienced that type of behavior from other Indigenous people. You know, and unfortunately, for me, it sucks that, you know, we'll do Idle No More, we'll do all these missing and murdered, we'll stand together for that, you know, and but we don't stand together all the time. And I don't really like the inconsistency of picking and choosing when we're going to support each other. You know, I think we should be supporting each other 100% at all times. I've been in people's territories where I'm fishing, and I was told, don't be fishing in our waters. You know, you're not from here, you're not allowed to fish here. Stuff to that nature. But yet you see festivals come to town and there's non-Indigenous people floating through their fishing rivers, throwing empty beer bottles and rug wrappers or whatever into the community, and I didn't see the same type of treatment being, you know, showed towards them. It's an unfortunate thing that I think is, you know, that happens. But the thing I like is I like to see that you don't focus on those things, right? You don't focus on that type of stuff that brings you down, or something that would kind of sandbag your creativeness. But it is something that you as a biracial person will experience. And the Indigenous music scene, to me, is in its infancy, and it's been in that stage in a long time, because it just seems to be like a slow growth process. I think there's potential growth in this music industry, Indigenous music, for people to be very successful and make a good living doing it. When that'll happen, I'm not exactly sure. Can't predict that. But how do you find yourself fitting in that genre? Is that something? I know there's another artist that I used to suggest performing in communities, Indigenous communities, and he was like, well, I don't want to be known as an Indigenous rapper. I want to be just a rapper. Right? And then at the end of his career, he was just an Indigenous rapper. So where do you find yourself in that, and how do you think about or feel about that?
Well, for me, I just like to talk about my life, and I just want to relate to people, and so I'm going to use my experiences, you know, and a lot of my experiences, partly like being First Nations, partly being Black, partly. So it's more just like trying to relate to people, you know, and if the First Nations First Nations community latches on to me, like, and I'm the voice for the First Nations people, that's totally okay for me. If I'm the voice for African American community, that's okay for me too. But, you know, I think they have a lot of great people, like Beyonce, it's hard to, or like John Legend, but I don't know, I think it's more important for me to just really be who you are, you know, and you know, just be honest and real, and if people kind of latch on to that, I think that's all that matters. I like being a role model for people. I remember I was talking to somebody close.
Before you get onto that,
Okay.
that last statement you said, is that Canadian?
Is what Canadian?
When you said, I just want to
The yes.
be yourself or be for the people or something.
Yeah, I'm a human being trying to figure out life, you know,
Yeah.
and part of part of being human being is having your interest, ancestry, and your culture,
Yeah.
and but I whoever can relate to me, that's all I that's all
Yeah, and I only asked that because
Yeah.
when I say that sounded Canadian to me when you saw
Okay.
when the way you explained who you want to be known as, to
Yeah.
me that sounded like a Canadian. And for me, this isn't in regards to just you. This is in regards to a conversation I had earlier about that triggered thoughts about what is Canadian. Like somebody was saying, "I'm Canadian." They're from Ghana, um, but they don't identify or connect with that. They're just like, "No, I'm Canadian." Which brings the thought to a lot of Indigenous people, okay, well, what the F is Canadian? What is that?
Oh,
Right?
it's interesting you say that. Wow, because I think being Canadian, I think I said this before. My opinion of Canada when I explain it to my friends in the States is just like Canada is a country of inclusivity and of refuge. So we want a lot of people that move here. There's a lot of immigration here. We want a lot of people to come here. We want them to feel safe and comfortable and provide them with a community. And I think that is mainly the Canadian way. It's like as we all acknowledge kind of like all the crazy stuff that exists outside of our borders.
Yeah.
And anybody who wants a safe place where people are going to be kind to them, that's a very Canadian thing. In Canada, I've noticed you are your culture first, and then you're Canadian. You know, if you want to be Canadian first, that's fine too. But I'm like, you see people with like countries like our flags from different countries. You know, they're protesting stuff that are happening in their home country. Like that wouldn't happen. At least I've never seen that happen in America. America, like you're American first, and then you're whatever wherever you come from, right? But it's a different culture, different values. But I really do like that about Canada. That it's really about being yourself and being safe and being who you are. At least that's my opinion, my experience.
Well, it is interesting because there are a lot of Indigenous people that are Canadian, consider themselves Canadian, a Canadian Indigenous person and part of Canadian society. And then there are those that choose to refer to themselves as Nehio, or I might mess this up and say Ongwe, and like Six Nations. Well, we have words how we identify ourselves in our own territories, and a lot of Indigenous people just see Canada laying all over their land, like a relative that's all over your couch, like it's time to go, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's those types of thinking, but there's also the wampum belt, the two-row wampum belt that was a part of the Iroquois Confederacy or the history out east in Ontario, Six Nations, where they had this wampum, which was basically a treaty on a belt that was all purple and it showed two rows of white lines, and it basically was saying to Canada that this is us and this is you, and we will travel through time side by side and coexist in this land, but we're not, we're coexisting in this land. We're not Canadian, we're not us, we just at peace coexisting. And so this is a historic belt that's held in museum or something. I'm not sure who actually has it. And I might have bastardized that story a little bit, but that was the premise of that belt, and it was just it's just interesting because as a visibly black person,
visible to people who aren't black.
Yeah, true.
Black people will be like, "What are you? Can I touch your hair?" I go through the black experience that black people go through, but they do it to me. Like, "What are you? Can I touch your hair?" Like, it's really funny.
Yeah, hey, that's a good point because I wouldn't know what that feels like. But I do know that in our circles, if you were sitting in a powwow drum, would you feel comfortable sitting at a powwow drum? Would you feel part of that group? Would you feel Indigenous? Would the people around that circle embrace you and feel like you're Indigenous? Now that's an old news because
I've done that, by the way.
Yeah, our communities have been interconnecting and whatever for a lot of years. So I don't know why it's even an issue these days. But and if it is, maybe it's not an issue for me. Maybe I'm just barking up an old tree or beating a dead horse. But I think what I would like to feel is that you feel connected to your community, and in this community, the Indigenous community strong in Vancouver and the surrounding areas. And I would like to know that you've been embraced and you feel part of, because I know that is a huge part of Indigenous culture. But when you have that sense of belonging and you feel part of this community and you know what your roles and responsibilities are, you feel a sense of connectedness and a sense of being, of knowing of who you are. You know, it's and that's what I want for you to have. And I don't know if you get that or if you even care. Like if you're even like, yeah, that's cool. I'm not really worried about it. But that's for me, on the outside looking in, what I'd hope that you've experienced based off of.
My experience on my First Nation side has always been very inclusive. It's been very, people, you got the blood in you, you're one of us. You know, I only, out of the 10 years I've been here, I only got the hint of like, oh, you're not one of us, from this silly girl that I used to do music with, and she was like, you don't have the trauma. She literally was saying, you don't have our trauma. Well, I was like, I don't want to cuss on the podcast, but I was pretty upset because she didn't know what I'd been through. That was really arrogant and rude of her.
Yeah.
Or it's like the same thing on my African American side when you're not black. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, my dad wasn't around for a long, like, I could go on and on about like whatever, right? So it's just, but I will say the majority, like with minus that one person, everyone else has always been cool with me, has always been respectful, always wanted me to be a part of things, was always, I felt very valued and important.
Yeah.
And, I'm proud to be First Nations. I love telling people that I'm First Nations. Firstly, because when in public, people ask me, like, what are you? It's like an icebreaker. Because even I was lucky enough to have a conversation with, I ran into the singer and the guitar player from the band Magic when they were doing a show here in Vancouver. And he asked me, like, what's your background? He was like, you look like you're Samoan, which I got that a lot in the States. And I was like, no, First Nations and Black. He's like, oh, that's cool. Like, it's just my thing, you know?
Yeah.
But I love telling people I'm First Nations because, just the respect and because I try to be a role model for people. You know what I mean? I try to do the best that I can, and if I can't, I can't make whatever a person's going through go away. At least I can show them that whenever you're ready, you can try to let that stuff go and try to learn from it. You know what I mean? And try to use it in a positive way. And I try to do that.
So that sounds good. That you feel like you're included, and there's inclusivity for you in the Indigenous circles and the communities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with that being said, you must have played at some Indigenous venues and events.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to Suzette. And Rob. I played at the there was a fashion show not too long ago at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, which was great. And, a good friend of mine, Rob, he asked me to play because unfortunately Murray Porter, shout out to Murray Porter.
Have you got to meet Murray Porter?
Yeah, I met him a couple times actually. He's an awesome blues piano
Man,
player.
I always thought that'd be cool if you got to meet him, got to collab with him someday.
I haven't got to collab with him yet, but we've definitely met each other. It felt there's lots of mutual respect between us as a musician. And I got to play for the fashion show, which was great. I used to do things I recorded Wonderful years ago with Kaya, which was great.
There's an old school name there that's not coming to me, but you can drop it if you know it.
Leland? Yeah, Leland. Shout out to Leland. The Chosen One?
Yeah, Discreet, the Chosen.
Yeah, Discreet, the
Old
Chosen
school
One.
hip hopper.
Yeah.
Know your history of Vancouver hip hop, Discreet, the Chosen One.
By the way, he's also an Afro-Indigenous person too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think he's from Squamish Nation.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I haven't seen him around for a while, but.
Yeah,
Yeah, so, well, that's pretty cool. What's going on for you nowadays? Like when you're gigging lots,
Oh yeah, I've been gigging. It's been insane. I mean, I can't complain. I'm very fortunate in a way. I want to be like grateful, and be like, oh, thank you, but at the same time I also feel like I did put in the effort to do it. So it's like I'm grateful for the things that came out at luck, and I feel proud of the things that I earned. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but yeah, I just been gigging a lot. It's been I've been playing my acoustic guitar and singing, doing a lot of cover gigs lately. It started out actually with a snowball effect for me. So unfortunately, the COVID was obviously really bad for the world, but for me personally, it was really good because I was so bored out of my mind. I was like, I'm going to go play music on the street. Like, and once I started playing music on the street, everything started changing. Like, any musician, I think they should start out playing on the street professionally for a multitude of reasons. One, it gets your ability to face people, and you literally get over there's somebody there watching you. And the other thing that's great too is that the attention that you are given while you're performing on the street is actually earned, so that you can actually figure out what you're doing that is right or wrong. You know, as opposed to if you go to open mic where it's actually rude to ignore you, or any other circumstance where people are caring about your feelings. You know, it's kind of hard to tell. They're always going to say you sound good, you know, because they're your friends and they love you, you know. And if you're at open mic, that's respect. But when you're on the street, you know, the attention you earn is the attention that you're worth. Yeah. So it's really great. So you do become a better musician. You can perform whenever you want, which that's usually a problem for most musicians, is trying to find gigs and getting enough exposure performing for people. But if you're on the street, you know, you can play all day if you want. Other thing too, which is pretty great, is if you do really well, just like it was my financial circumstances changed. It was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like, people are giving you money right away, and I was just like, I went from bussing at a restaurant making $25 a week in tips to like not worrying about money because I could just go play on the street,
yeah.
Which was awesome. And then when I moved to Vancouver, that's when the crowds started happening, and I had these huge, insane crowds where like all of Granville Street from like wall to wall. It was getting so wild. It was so fun. I was like, this is what it kind of feels like to be a rock star. I was like, I'd never experienced this my entire life, and this is like me. Meanwhile, for me, like, I got my start playing at like Dumpsters by Dairy Queen in Hampton, Virginia. Like, shout out to Tropical Jam, Mr. Matty. And he was a wonderful man, but it was just like, man, just like, dude. I remember it's just one guy's mom would set up a lawn chair. We'd spend like 2 hours setting up full like subs, and like we had a snake, we had this whole thing. There's someone's mom's there. And we play. I remember I never laughed so hard. My friend Ian Marshall, we're getting ready to go to a gig. He used to play trumpet in my band in high school, Tropical Jam. And his dad was like, why are you guys like rushing me to leave just so you can go out there and make your 15 cents at a hot dog? We laughed so hard. It's like, it was so true. It kind of hurt a little bit, but it was funny. But yeah, it was, I went from that to like, wow, everyone's like screaming for me like a rock star. And I was like, and it was consistent every single time I'd play at the beach. And so, you know, when that started happening, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I really like this. I'm on to something great. And I just want to keep going. I knew that eventually I'm going to have to start writing my own songs, you know, and I did that, but then I got bogged down by things when I was younger, and then now I'm just trying to get back into that, my creative energy. But it went from busking into now I'm playing in bars and restaurants where, like, yes, on Friday I did 3 gigs in a day. Like, I did a festival, I did another bar, and then I did another bar, which I'd never done that, where my drummer, I was explaining to him, I was like, most people, like, they play 1 gig every 3 months, you know, when they have their job. And I'm just like, he has his day job, but like, we do 7 gigs a week. Like, 3 to 7, well, I do 7 gigs, and he does 3 of them with me. I'm just like, that's, like, you're, you know, you've got really lucky, man. Like, you know, and it's just, I'm just kind of going with this whole thing. I'm just figuring it all out as I go, as anybody else is doing it, because there's no necessarily a curriculum, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of highs and a lot of lows, you know, and but it's when you get through those lows, you realize how much you love it.
Yeah, so you said something about you played at a festival. What festival is that?
Oh, it was the Irish Fusion Festival. Yeah,
No, was a turnout there? Like, was it a big event or?
Yeah, it was huge. It was by Rogers Arena. It wasn't at Rogers Arena. It was outside of it. You know that lot there where you can see.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, two big stages. The sound guy. The sound was awesome. It was funny. Yeah.
Nice.
Great.
And how long did you get on stage?
Played for an hour.
Played for an hour.
Yeah.
By yourself.
With my drummer. His name's Brandon.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Brandon.
Yeah.
Brando.
Brandon Reed.
Yeah, so that was cool. And so you just played covers and.
Yeah, just a lot of covers. Oh yeah, I did. A lot of crazy stuff that happened. Like a year ago, I did a cover of "Every Breath You Take," and then the police, the official police Instagram, they reposted it, which was wild. So that was like, and so it just you saying that reminded me. Oh yeah, we did that song, and it's funny when people, you do songs that people don't expect you to do. Like that's kind of my whole shtick, where it's just like this guy just on acoustic. Like everyone will bring loops and stuff, and I'm like. That's cool. I never really got into it just because I think I got my start. It's because I got my start in orchestra, so I always felt organic about music, And however, I did start learning about production and stuff, which is cool. But I was just like, I want to do the same thing, but I only want to do it with acoustic. And I remember, sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, but like we were doing a festival where all the musicians were meeting each other, and you got to see all the different acts. They're all wonderful. There's this guy, Maddie. He had his pedals, he had his kick drum and everything, and he had everyone go, and you could feel it in the subs. I was like, oh, this is tough to follow. He's like, okay, you're next, Zach, and I just have my acoustic, and I sing. And I'm just like, all right. And then, somehow I just got, like, everyone was going crazy and dancing with just the acoustic and singing, and it's just, I try to, I don't know if you can see in the video, but I've had this guitar for years, and you can see the wear and tear on it. Like, here, I'll show you, and then I'll show you. People at home here, like for me, just basically whacking it, trying to get as much sound as I can out of it. And I try to teach people when I teach them acoustic that a guitar is actually, in my personal philosophy, a rhythm instrument, and like not playing a note is a note, like so like I've figured out a way to play where I can get people to dance while playing the notes by just like doing like tricks and stuff between the notes. But
So I noticed while you were telling the story, you referred to something as being wonderful. I forget what exactly you're referring to, but it did remind me of a song that you wrote, Wonderful.
oh yeah, wonderful, yeah.
And that was one of the first songs that you wrote?
I think it was like my fourth song, and I remember sending it to you, and you're like, you wrote that song? You were in disbelief, like, you wrote that? Because I wrote a cheesy song called I Am Who I Am. I sent it to you, and then you were just like, you wrote that? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I didn't know it was good at the time.
Yeah, for me, like, I think one of the things is, because I have an engineering background from Columbia Academy, I went 2 years ago, and what that did for me was now when I watch TV or listen to music, like, I can't listen to it, and probably similar to you, I can't listen to it just for what it is. I'm hearing tempo, key changes, breakdowns, instruments, placements of instruments, different types of maybe hi-hats or stuff. Like things stick out to me when I listen to it. I just can't listen to it like most people. It probably just washes over their brain. They're just like, oh, this is so great.
What? Sorry.
And so that's how it is. And even when I watch TV, the lion is creeping through the tundra, and you can hear his footprints. But I know there's somebody in the freaking Foley art room that's crinkling some paper or something, and they're making it sound like he's walking, and they're just adding it in for dramatic effect and stuff. So when I watch things, this is how I process it. So when you sent me that song, I was impressed by it, but then I also heard and could feel and understand what you were doing there. And when you come from like the hip hop background, where I was a producer for many years, working with a lot of local talent, there's none of that happened. There's no construction, chord progressions, there's no melodies being developed, section A, B, C's, bridges, key or chord changes, all those things. But that's what was happening. So that's why I was just like, regardless if you feel like it's one of the better songs, the best songs, even a good song to you today, those are the things that impress me. And just in general about artists. So it is a great song. Sorry, you're gonna.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was having. Is that okay with the light there?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I was having an epiphany this week. Actually, yesterday. Actually, be more specific. specific about how when you don't actually do the art, the only thing you have to go off of when you're observing the art is how it made you feel.
Yeah.
It was like really interesting. It was just like that person. I was like, I had the same problem with it, but I had a guitar player background, you know, so I would go like always go in this chord, and I would start to visualize how I do it on guitar, and you know, this note, this note, this note. And I'm like, okay, I know how to do it. Like I could hear guitar solos at one point, and then like visualize, oh, it's right there, you know. And then I realized that as an artist, I had to stop doing that.
Yeah.
As a guitar player, I could do that, but as an artist, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Because then you're not listening to it and observing it the way a regular person would.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting. I was just like, oh, and the only thing that a person's going to understand is how that sound made them feel. When you said that, how did that make them feel? So it was like now getting to the point of like, this is a table, but then how does this table make me feel? And how can I use that to get you to understand and what sort of context how I was feeling about something? You know, that's where I'm kind of realizing now. It's like you view the world as different. Like if I didn't have language, how can I get you to understand what I was thinking right now?
Yeah.
What using the things in this room. That's kind of like where that's the challenge. And that's kind of where I'm at.
So, with that being said, our light on our camera had just died. Died, so that might be a signal for us to kind of tie things up. I know those who are watching are probably feeling like I'm feeling. You don't want this conversation to end. It's been pretty interesting and captivating. I know you're all captivated at home there. With that being said, unfortunately, I can't give it to you all. You're going to have to seek out Zach Saunders online. You're going to have to follow him on his Instagram, check him out on YouTube, head out to one of his shows, advocate for him to be on certain shows and certain bills, get him out there performing. So you're going to have to do some of that work for yourself. I know you like the entertainment, you like the value and the stuff that he has to share. With that being said, we're going to close this episode with Zach Saunders, and I just want to give you some time to kind of shout out your Instagrams, where you're going to be at, what you got in the future. And if you want to play us out with Wonderful, we can do that.
Sure, we can do that, yeah. So yeah, my Instagram is at the Zach Saunders, Zach with the H, Saunders with the U. Only because people go, is it with the H or okay? Like the H is silent. And Saunders, some people say Sanders, but it's actually Saunders with a U. Yeah. And then so at the Zach Saunders, and then you can have some songs on Spotify. You look up Zach Saunders, and then SoundCloud, same thing. I have more covers on my SoundCloud. As far as where I'm playing, the best thing to do is to follow me on my Instagram. I post when I'm playing. I'm playing at a let's see, this Friday I'm playing at a place called Donnellan's. What was the date today? So
How about next Friday? Just so we got time for this episode to drop.
Sure.
We might be able to catch up with you at the end of the month or beginning of September.
Yeah, so September 1st, I'm playing at this awesome pop-up bar called The Batch behind BC Place. It's amazing. Yeah, you can't miss it. It's right by the water. It's in the Plaza Nation. And I'll be there at 8:30 if you're not doing anything. So yeah.
Sweet. And I just want to thank you guys for tuning in to Dopest Natives Alive, and this is definitely one of them here. Make sure you check out Zach Saunders online and everywhere in Vancouver. That's dope. We're just gonna get him to play us out with a little bit of Wonderful. I'll just turn your effects back on.
That's what we want. Check. Might need a little bit more mic because I can't be as close to it. But yeah, so this song is on my SoundCloud if you want to check it out. Wonderful. You don't even know who you are. A million thoughts apart of you knows exactly what you need. Planes and trains and cars will not take you far enough. So run to the start when you love all both ways, 1,000 eyes gaze at you. When it's a right turn only, but you go straight through the day. And birds fly high and leaves will fall. Life goes on. After all, and the world goes round and round. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. You're bigger than the sun. You're taller than the sky. So I put you down to earth. You're down to normal size. You're the lighthouse in the dark. No water can put out your spark. You're amazing. When you look both ways, 1,000 eyes gaze at you. When it's a right turn only, but you go straight through the day. And birds fly high and leaves will fall. Life goes on. After all, and the world goes round and round. It's wonderful. When you're pushing but you're moving backward. Never will you fall behind. It'll be over when you look both ways, 1,000 eyes gaze at you. When it's a right turn only, but you go straight through the day. When birds fly high and leaves will fall, life goes on. After all, and the world goes round and round. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
And that's Zach Saunders, everybody, and definitely one of the dopest natives alive. Thank you for staying tuned. Till next time.